Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my QGroundControl tutorial series. This is episode 1 where I'll be explaining some prerequisites, goals, getting set up, and making our first build of QGroundControl. Let's go ahead and get started. In these tutorials, I'm assuming you have a basic understanding of Git, C++, JavaScript, and basic software development concepts, such as what an IDE is. If you don't know these, go follow a quick guide or tutorial about what you don't know and come back here. You don't need to be an expert in these by any means whatsoever. Just have a beginner or even hobbyist level knowledge, and that's more than enough understanding. For any more advanced questions beyond what I'm covering here, you can ask them down below, but I would generally refer you to the documentation on QGroundControl and the Pixhawk4 stack linked below. The Pixhawk4 Slack group is also sometimes helpful. Just be aware all of these places are sometimes not the greatest in terms of information they're offering. Sometimes they're half answers, or they'll link you to something that doesn't really help. But they're usually relatively friendly, and if you're persistent, you can usually figure out what you need to know. And that's especially with, very specific questions. With all that said, let's go ahead and get started. To get a basic understanding of what we're dealing with here, QGroundControl is an application made using the Qt ecosystem. The program is primarily C++ with the GUI written mostly in a variant of JavaScript called QML. We'll be using Qt's included IDE called Qt Creator to work with QGroundControl. It's cross-platform and works well on Windows and Ubuntu Linux from my own experience. You want to install both Qt and Qt Creator. I have Qt version 5.15 installed, and I'm using Qt Creator version 4.12, both of which I'm using on Windows. I will be including a link to the Qt Online installer below that you can go and click and install. It's pretty easy. And if you don't have that installed yet, pause the video, go install that, and again, come back. Okay, now that we have that installed, we are going to go clone the source code for QGroundControl off of GitHub at github.com/mavlink/QGroundControl. Again, link will be below. For basic work with QGroundControl, this is everything we're going to need. It's a big repository and there are a lot of branches, but we don't care about the vast majority of those. You might care about the links down below to documentation, however, so do take note of that. Now that we've taken a look at all of that, let's copy the link and clone the repo into an empty folder. I'm doing this on Windows using Git's built-in Git Bash console, but you can do it however you'd like. What I'm going to do is clone the latest stable branch instead of clone from the master. In this case, it's stable version 4.0. Now that it's finished downloading, I'm going to go into that folder and check that we downloaded the correct branch. Here I'm opening up Qt Creator, the IDE of the Qt ecosystem. I'm going to use the file browser here to open up the project that we had just cloned by finding the PRO file in that directory that we have with our source code. I'm using the MSVC 2019 kit here, which is part of Microsoft Visual Studio 2019. You may have more kits or fewer showing. On Windows, the latest version of MSVC 64-bit is generally what you want to go with, and on Linux, the GCC kit is the one you want to use. You will quickly see if the kit you've selected won't work or is incompatible. So it's not a big deal if you pick the wrong one. But generally there's better information on kits and which ones work with QGroundControl. And I will link any information on that, again, down below. On opening up the project for this first time after cloning, you will get an error where the Mavlink folder does not exist. QGroundControl has submodule dependencies you must initialize before building. Open up a terminal in the root of the project and type what I have in. The recursive is optional. QGroundControl has no nested submodule dependencies, but it's a habit I like to have. I'm going to set my build target to release for the sake of build time in this video. QGroundControl does have some tabs and options in Windows you will only see in debug builds that can be useful for development and testing, so bear that in mind. It's what we will be using in the future. I'll start the build and quickly we'll see several warnings pop up. This is nothing to worry about in this case, it's just how QGroundControl is. If there are new warnings from something that you have programmed yourself, maybe take a look at it. I tend to also keep an eye on the compile output window, both to see how quickly things are going and to quickly see the breakpoint if a build fails. This can take several minutes, so just sit back and grab a drink or whatever, I don't know. Just sit back and watch it build. It's not particularly exciting most of the time. Okay, here we can see QGroundControl built just fine and is now running from source. You'll see I have some aircraft icons popping up here since some settings are saved between versions, but that has nothing to do with the build succeeding or not. If you don't see certain things like those little aircraft, you're fine. We'll see more about that in the next video where I talk about the structure of QGroundControl and implementing a simple button in the UI. It's probably the first step in getting familiar with the overall architecture of how the program is built and what does what. What does the C++ do and what does the QML do? That's all for today, and I will see you next time with that tutorial.